Okay, go ahead, Sam.
Perfect. Well, pleasure to be here and see everyone's beautiful, ugly sweaters. I'm going to walk you all through kind of an overview of Prairie Robotics, what our focus is within the industry, and some of the success we've had working with cities to date. And I think since it's such a large group, we'll save all questions to the end, but happy to kind of dig into them then. And with that, screen share looks good, everyone. Fantastic. So, as Ali mentioned before, I'm Sam Dietrich, CEO and co-founder of Prairie Robotics, where we're focused on recycling made simple. And what we see is looking across the country, contamination is a major issue from large municipalities to rural areas. It's the one kind of common denominator that we see across all recycling programs and organics programs as well. And the downstream impacts of contamination really can't be overstated. And when we look at recycling education today, we see that it falls short in that residents recycle, haulers haul this material away, and cities can try passive approaches where everyone gets the same kind of blanket education campaign, or residents can go to search out what goes where. As I'm sure many of you are familiar with, you can do small scale manual audits, but just due to the time and labor, there's really no way to take these across an entire city. And that's where we see the need for solid waste programs to be able to provide large scale active feedback and education to their residents. And where we come in to install AI cameras directly on recycling trucks and organics trucks as well, identifying contamination at each individual household. So after we've identified the contamination, we'll also educate residents on what goes where. What you're seeing here is a recycling hopper where we've identified contaminants. We'll take the image captured and blur the contents from view from previous households that don't include contamination tied to that specific household. And then we'll automatically insert this on a postcard that's branded to exactly what the city in question wants to communicate to their residents. So we adjust this with each city that we work with. Well, we can also send this information through text message, email, or in-app notifications to residents as well. Now, since we're tracking all of this data back to a centralized database, we're able to identify contamination hotspots across the city for additional outreach. And since we track it back to each individual household, we can see how each home is improving over time as well. So in short, we make recycling simple, allowing residents to recycle in the same easy way. Using our AI and installing our cameras across an entire fleet, the entire fleet becomes a mobile auditing platform, which brings personalized education to all the households, really bringing active feedback to an entire community. Now, to just dig into that end-to-end workflow, we've really focused on making it as automated as possible. So today, we don't even install a screen for drivers. We automatically capture data off of each truck, match carts to households, identify contamination. Administrators can review what we've detected and then generate postcards and digital notifications, all while evaluating campaign performance. So to show you what that optional review step looks like, what you're seeing here is the AI has identified a non-black garbage bag, and administrators gone into our dashboard and also flagged this welding mask that you see here as well, which doesn't belong in the recycling, but it's such an obscure item that we see so infrequently, it's not something the AI has been trained to identify as of yet. But doing this, we're able to include it on the postcard sent to the resident and tie it back to that household as well for reporting purposes. So to talk about some of the success that we've seen, the city of East Lansing in Michigan, on the left-hand side, you see a contamination heat map from the first 10 weeks of baseline data collection. We then ran an education campaign with them. And then on the right-hand side, you see weeks 20 to 30 after we stopped sending education to residents. So we saw a significant reduction in the amount and severity of contamination across the city. Well, we didn't see a drop in participation. And this was also confirmed with the tonnage reports they were getting back from their MRF. So while we've reduced contamination, we aren't actually losing out on those good recyclables. This was all accomplished by the postcard you see here. All residents received the same back of the postcard on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we A/B tested two different messaging. The first being an "Are you wish cycling?" Second being a "Do you know what to throw?" So this was designed working with the recycling partnership and their behavior science team, with a lot of really interesting ideas of how to test this with two population groups and a control group as well. And I won't pause too long here, but since Allie's still on my screen, Allie, what's your knee-jerk reaction? Which one do you think drove a bigger impact?
I feel like the wish cycling, because they don't know what it is. And so they're like, wait, what is this? What am I doing wrong? I don't know. That would be my guess.
And she's got it. The wish cycling did in fact drive a larger behavior change and more of a sustained change as well. It's statistically significant, but the bottom line is the biggest change is simply getting the feedback in the hands of your residents. Well, over the first 6 months we worked with the city of East Lansing, we did over 50,000 automated audits, sent over 7,500 postcards, and Iris Waste Diversion Specialists confirmed a 25% reduction by weight and contamination at the MRF. We also saw an increase in HDPE and tin across their MRF audits. We really attribute this to residents just being more mindful of what goes where and thinking about the recycling program more often. And this also resulted in them being nominated for Program of the Year at the Resource Recycling Conference. So to talk about some of the success we've had in Canada as well, what you see here is with City of Abbotsford, we A/B tested a keep out versus a keep in. We'll let everybody reserve judgment and we can have a discussion at the end of the presentation for what you think will be more impactful. Well, we saw similar results to what we've seen in East Lansing with reduced contamination across the city. And then to highlight beyond just postcards, we also have partnerships with Recollect, now owned by Routeware, and Recycle Coach, which some of you may be familiar with. These are platforms for reminding residents what goes where, digital reminders. So through these partnerships, we're able to send texts, emails, in-app notifications to residents that are already signed up for these. What that actually looks like is a household can still receive a highly personalized postcard, but in addition, they'll get this app, text, or email notification. And what we really see this doing is driving a conversation in the household between maybe the person who brings in the mail, the other who's signed up for these digital reminders about what goes where. And we've seen a significant reduction in contamination with this, just when we look at how this drives change when compared to just using one strategy versus the other. Well, with the city of Leduc in Alberta, Canada, we've started to work towards identifying contamination in organics. So this is the first city that rolled out AI for organic stream. It's not nearly as common for how we're focused on recycling, but something we're actively working towards and looking at more places we can deploy. And their education strategy also involves a third strike letter. So what that means is over 80% of households we've seen improve after 3 postcards or less. But for that minority of households that are still showing repeat offenses, it makes sense to kind of escalate the messaging. We'll automatically generate this letter that's addressed to the household with images of their past contaminants. And then they have an education officer or bylaw officer actually drop this off at the household. So that's how they're kind of using AI to handle the bulk of interactions while focusing their limited time on engaging with those homes who need more of a manual approach. Well, with the city of Greensboro, North Carolina, we've also taken our platform and pushed it into a mobile app. So what this allows them to do is to actually do those typical feet on the street programs, curbside audits, where they tag an individual household. They're able to identify contaminants that they're seeing there. Well, this also leverages our existing education platform so that the household gets the postcard with exactly what the auditor saw in the mail in the next few days. So it's kind of that follow-up education that can be missing in some of these historically. So with that, kind of our focus, our vision of the company is we're looking at how can we use AI to identify contamination, but even greater than that is how can we take this to start to engage with residents in different ways, whether that's through postcards, digital notifications, escalating messaging, or streamlined manual audits for additional households. It's really just a way of having that comprehensive engagement platform for haulers and cities to leverage to keep contamination to a minimum. And with that, would love to have any questions from folks on the call. Liz, let's go with it.
Hi, thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate that. I've got a number of questions, but one of the things I am most curious about is you said that this system can identify contamination in organics streams. And none of the pictures you showed us showed that in action.
If you look closely in the bottom left here, this is an organics hopper. So you can see some leaves, a pizza box, and what we're flagging here are 2 plastic bags labeled as bag material.
And so is there a different set of criteria that the AI is looking at when you're evaluating organics versus recycling?
Yeah, organics, it's kind of a different beast in one sense. And it's the way our system is designed is that all the items we can identify today, each municipality has the option to toggle it on or off. So if we're just thinking recycling, we can identify, black plastic, clamshell packaging, pizza boxes. Some cities want to flag these as infractions, some don't. On the organic side, it gets a bit more tricky just with what the acceptable materials are. So when we think about like plastic bags, there are some cities that allow those quote unquote biodegradable plastics, depending how their organics process actually is performed later. To us, to our AI, it'll still just be registered as a plastic bag. So it really depends on what the program accepts for how much we can leverage to identify the differences there. But overall, kind of the foundation or the basis of the AI is the same in that it's a visual system looking for things that don't belong in either the recycling or the organic stream. Sorry, I forget your name. I know you were just traveling. Cut the plastic.
Yes, sorry, I keep forgetting to fix that. It's my name's Brian. Sam, I'm really excited about this. This presentation today. Here in Denver, Colorado, we just passed a law requiring commercial properties countywide provide multi-stream diversion, and everybody's flipping out because contamination. So I appreciate that. It seems like for the most part, what I've seen is municipal providers being able to utilize this. My question comes into at the commercial aspect. A lot of these bins or systems are going to be shared, co-opt for the waste, for the compost, or for the recycling on the property levels. So when you're working with the cities, obviously you're putting or making sure that there's cameras at the tipping point so that when they're capturing the bin, each address is geo-markered, I'm assuming, so that you know whose bin you're capturing at the residential level. Do you have any insight into how this is going to work at the commercial level?
Yeah, it's something I can't share too much on it right now, but we've got a project in motion launching at Q1 next year on a commercial side, front end loads. It kind of depends on the hauler in question for how they want to be actioning on this data. From most of our conversations, it's been based around we're going to be tying it back to the specific bin. If it's a shared bin between a couple businesses, it's up to the hauler to how they want to have that conversation with those folks and how they actually want to be actioning on that data. I can share that we're not planning any postcard campaigns on the commercial side. It's going to be alerting the sales admins, customer service admins within those haulers of what we've identified so they can action on it themselves.
So to follow up on that, then you could or you can identify based on the hauler who's doing it, the location of the bin, so that, what we're anticipating is that the public services, because I saw Brandy on here earlier, for example, may come to a point where at each residential facility, if there's contamination, it happens more than a few times or whatever in a given time period, that they would start administering a penalty to the client. I believe that Waste Management is actively already doing that. So by showing the contamination, then the property can start to try to track back to for themselves where that contamination is coming from. Is this something that you're able to not just with the postcard campaign or whatever, but I mean, you have more in-depth reporting available for the waste haulers or the property management entities to try to solve those problems internally?
Yeah, we've got a full dashboard suite that allows haulers or any users to really dig into on what we call a service address, whether that's a residential property or whether that's a commercial property, to look at what we've identified over time and to understand a trend. Is it improving? Is it getting worse? Et cetera, et cetera. Great questions, Brian. Jennifer at the top of the queue.
Hello, thank you so much for this information. This is really cool stuff. So as I'm sure you know, we also passed a producer responsibility law last year, which is in implementation. I'm on the board of the PRO until my tenure at Swire is complete. And these look like technologies that could and will help with the quality of the material that is being recovered in the system. So a couple of questions that I have is, how do you look at pricing for these systems, one, and then two, do you see a difference between successful implementation and these rates, these improvements between rural or smaller communities versus larger metropolitan communities, multifamily versus single family, those kinds of differentials?
Yeah, great question. So business model, we're priced on a per truck basis. So if you think about a small municipality that only has one truck, they pay 1/10 what a very dense urban center with 10 trucks will pay. So the business model itself is really just priced on your utilization of it. If you're running a 10 truck fleet, you take 10 times what somebody running a 1 truck fleet runs. The question on residential versus multifamily, so I should specify we haven't done any work in multifamily today. Multifamily is we could have a whole conversation about that. We've extensively looked at it. There's some really interesting problems to solve there, and it kind of depends on city ordinances in question. So not to go too far off on a tangent, but there are some municipalities in Canada that have taken all their multifamily properties, and they will essentially do a RFP for the collections and a separate RFP for the processing of those multifamilies. So they essentially lump like 800 multifamilies, we need one hauler. To us, we need that in place before we look at trying to solve this. Because in a lot of jurisdictions, it's like you have an ordinance, multifamily has to recycle, but if you have 800 multifamily buildings and each one has an independent hauler, and that hauler is also picking up from commercial on the same routes that they're doing multifamily, because they base their routes on geographic density, not collection type, it just becomes like so difficult. Long way of me saying we're waiting for some changes in the industry before we dig too much into the multifamily. We could, happy to have a follow-up conversation because it's a really interesting area. Laura, jump in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sam. Okay, well, 2 questions for you. One of them was going to be around the pricing. So thank you, Jennifer, for asking that. And the comment, Sam, that you just made, needing to have the commercial stream a little bit separated from multifamily streams. What if there was an ordinance that was in place mandating recycling both with apartment complexes and businesses at the same time? Would that change your answer at all?
Yeah, that would change it. The complexity is really going to just come back to like who's the buyer in that such, like who wants to action and use the data? Is it going to be like a city who put this ordinance in place, who wants to now see what contamination is across any business or any multifamily, and they're going to handle the education? Or is it like the haulers who are going to be using this data to educate people? Do we need to somehow be like fusing all the data in from different haulers so the city can analyze it across an entire city at like the multifamily scale? So yeah, that makes it a lot simpler if there's ordinances on both sides. But it kind of just comes back to like the basic question of like who wants the technology. Today we have some cities that directly contract with us and have our equipment on, their private hauler's truck, whether that's Waste Connections, GFL, Casella, Republic, any of the others.
Right. Okay. A follow-up question. My second question was with regards to the data flow. Talking with certain communities, there seems sometimes to be a nervousness about keeping all of this data and tracking people's behavior specifically at residences. I'm curious to hear what your experience has been so far. How do communities react to being like Big Brother and having all this data to kind of peer into your recycling bin? Has it caused problems? And if so, how have you overcome it?
Yeah, great question. So every city we work with, we do a pre-education campaign. So before we send any postcards to residents, we'll launch a press release that will help the city craft to talk about why this program is coming into place, that its goals are to educate residents on what goes where, collect information on common mistakes. And we've seen that in doing that, in kind of like being upfront with the community, that recycling contamination, organics contamination is a major problem because of these issues. The city's previously tried to solve it, still an ongoing issue. This is now why we're implementing this program. We haven't seen significant pushback. Typically, we see less than 0.5% of all postcards sent to households result in a phone call from the resident, either requesting more information or saying, somebody walked down my back alley and put that black garbage bag in my recycling bin. It couldn't have been me. So we've seen the pre-education side kind of handles that. And then on the kind of like the data, how you use this, how you're tracking this, the goal here isn't to create like a 10-year timeline on how each household is recycling, because people move in, people move out. Typically, like when we look at this third strike letter I'm showing here, this is like based on successive contamination events. So we're really only looking at like how each household's performance has been in the last 8 to 12 weeks. It's not forever. So I mean, if someone new moves into the household, like the past performance will essentially reset in 2 to 3 months. And Rangathan, Ringa.
Yeah, hi, yeah. Thanks, Sam. So yeah, actually my question was pretty similar about privacy concerns and do residents push back on this kind of thing? And you talked about education. So yeah, pretty similar question.
Yeah. Oh, and I can also speak to privacy, like all the data that we capture is stored in the country of origin. So we've fully duplicated our system in that data collected in Canada remains in Canada, data collected in the United States remains in the United States. It's never shared or sold to any third parties. Like the goal of this and our business model is based on reducing contamination, not on using this data for anything else.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, so that's great. But I mean, is there like some kind of pushback from any of these cities that the residents, are concerned about their privacy and so on?
Not so much in the sense
Not
that
so much. That's interesting.
Yeah, and when you look at like a lid lift campaign or a feet on the street campaign, that's been an industry norm for 20 years, having people go out and look in carts. This is really no different. It's just taking that and scaling it up in a much larger way. But at the end of the day, when you look at waste, it's the only utility that you don't get feedback on. Every month you get feedback on your water, your electricity, anything else.
Oh, right. True. Yeah.
This is just closing the feedback loop on solid waste itself.
Great. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Hi, I have unfortunately in previous roles been on the receiving end of this information, and with certain haulers, it does come with a fee. But I'm wondering if there is like, can haulers use this information in real time to potentially say like, holy moly, we just got a container full of motor oil, we need to like divert this truck to, well, I don't know, it sounds like a disaster to me, but like something like that where they would be able to tell like in real time, like this truck is too contaminated or potentially it has something dangerous in it, like a battery, we should stop compacting this truck or something like that.
Right. So I guess today we don't identify batteries, just the variety of the item. It comes in so many different shapes and sizes. It's difficult to be able to identify like laptops, cell phones, birthday cards, everything that a battery comes in today. Vape pens, it's outrageous. And to your second question, can haulers use this? We've had some conversations with different MRFs, organics facilities about having like a real-time health check or health report on a truck when it arrives to say truck 123 has 20 black garbage bags and 20 non-black garbage bags and 100 pieces of styrofoam, etc. And the feedback we've often gotten is that we don't have a process in place to triage this. Like it's great you folks can provide that report to us, but what are we going to do with it? So I'm still interested in how we can use the technology for that. We just haven't found a partner who's ready to kind of take that data and run their MRF, run their organics in a different manner based on the health check of the truck that's coming into the facility. Great questions, by the way. Fantastic. Liz, I see your hand up again.
If you give me 2 hours, I'm going to have my hand up the whole time. Always have questions. So one of my questions is about the technology. Well, before I move into that, I think I want to revisit what was being asked about the privacy issue. I hear what you're saying, Sam, that most utilities are monitored by the utility provider, how much power you use, how much water you use. Everyone is used to that information being available to someone outside the home. What's different about waste is waste can contain very personal information about your life that your electricity use and water use does not contain. Additionally, having someone look in your bin is something that supposedly a homeowner could observe themselves. Whereas having an automated AI constantly looking at your trash is not something that the resident is going to be able to observe just by looking at the truck. They're not going to know. And in Colorado, we have experienced that our citizens seem to be particularly sensitive to having their waste stream analyzed by people they don't know, by whether that's the haulers or the government. And although legally and in concept, it's the same as another utility, in Colorado, waste handling is not treated as a utility. Most of the cities in Colorado do not have any waste program themselves. A few of them contract out with a hauler, but the majority of communities in Colorado leave waste hauling and recycling to the private industry. And therefore, they're very uncomfortable with private industry having a window into their personal lives. And
Gotcha. It's like the
so,
friend system, if you
yeah.
will.
And so I think the fear, what Laura was referencing as Big Brother, from a citizen standpoint, it does not seem that there's any sort of protective measure for someone to know that that information that's being gathered on the regular from the AI is going to be protected information. It's being collected by a private company. Ostensibly, it's going to be owned by that private company. What's to stop them from using that in a way that might be harmful to the individual resident? What are the protections of privacy in place for people that may be exposed to this?
Right. Yeah. I think it's, an active conversation we can have. And as we look to Colorado and how we can deploy and be successful within the state, I think, looking at our data retention and how we store data collected, whether it's images or whether it's a note on an address to say 2 black garbage bags, that's what I would first look to address. Like, we don't need to, data should only be stored as it's being actioned on, if you will. So it's data is only collected for the explicit purpose of reducing contamination in the recycling and organic streams. And on that note, we can adjust the platform and adjust the retention settings, meaning how long do we continue to store that data to match that main goal, with the additional goal of just making sure we're not allowing anyone else who uses the platform to store data or to use it in any other ways besides that primary goal of reducing contamination, if that makes sense.
It does. My follow-up question would be, does the system learn across communities? So if you have it deployed in Denver and it's gathering information and it's also deployed in Grand Junction, are those AI systems talking to each other so that they can learn how to identify things more efficiently?
Yeah, that is correct. The AI that we train and redeploy is a standard AI for all communities. So as we continue to grow and add in new contaminants, all communities benefit from those additional items that we can that we've learned to automatically identify. Brian? I think you might be on mute.
It helps if I hit the mute button. I got to remember all these things again. Heard a couple of very interesting things. One, is with the data, I'm curious as far as like what your contracts currently do, because, you know, like I think about waste management in 2022 or 21 during their sustainability conference live stream, they were very clear and blatant that cameras were going on the back of every one of their trucks, period. So that the recording at every tip site was going to be happening regardless. And I don't know what waste management does with that, but I appreciated Liz's or whoever was asking that question about privacy as far as what does happen with the data and like municipality wise. Is this something that like because I think about our friends here in Denver at Casser who are responsible for all kinds of things like this. And so as a city, you know, being able to utilize that information to start like who the bad actors are, if you will, right? Who's not doing it well, who needs retraining. But then like, is that public information ever, or is that like in your contracts that it's maintained privately?
No, it's always maintained privately. So it's
Okay.
never, you know, the contamination data of what we've identified at 10 Main Street, for example, in municipality XYZ is never released publicly. That always remains private information. The public information that might come out of a municipality or what they might publish would be things along the lines of last month we sent X number of postcards, saw Y reduction in contamination, sent Z number of digital notifications. Great job, everybody, on improving.
Okay. The other thing I'm really curious about, because this sounds amazing. What does it run? How much is the cost of service?
Ooh, cost of service depends on your scale, length of contract. Those are the two main variables. But if you want to have a follow-up private conversation, happy to dig into our pricing more specifically.
I would be very interested.
Yeah, definitely.
I
With
see that Ringo still has his hand up. I'm not sure if that's an old hand or a new hand.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I did not take it down. I should lower it. But yeah, I do have a follow-up question though. So just to add to Liz's question. So in terms of privacy, so there's both the negative and positive, right? One is the negative is, oh, you have so many so much of contamination, you know, that's a negative, and I don't want everybody to know that I have had that contamination. The other way of looking at it is also that you know, it could be used as marketing tool, right? I mean, the camera has an insight into my consumption pattern of whatever food and beverages that I throw away, right? The containers or whatever. So it can kind of know that, you know, I'm prone to consuming certain things or whatever. So, I mean, it's a similar concern to the Amazons of the world. I mean, so Amazon knows your consumption patterns and so on. So they will, you know, target you with advertising or whatever. But I don't know whether that's at all a concern here or something which.
no, I mean, sorry, the one distinction I would make is that we don't have knowledge of your consumption patterns. We don't identify.
No, you don't track it. I know, but what I'm saying is, if somebody is really paranoid, they'll say, "Oh, you know, you can actually with AI, it's very simple to just look at the brands and so on that I consume, right?" So that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say very simple, but yeah.
Or I mean, it's feasible. Let me put it that way. Yeah, with the logos and all that, right? With all these, yeah, brand logos and so on. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, very, very interesting technology. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, perfect. And Liz?
I told you, I'm just an endless font of questions.
Come
So have you had any circumstances where the city has paid for the program so that they can do the education, but the hauling and the installation was done on a private company's trucks.
Oh yeah, numerous times.
And how does that play out? How do they, does the data go to the city and not the private hauler? Do they both get it? Do they share costs, or does the city pay for it entirely? How does that work?
Typically, when it's city initiated, the city is paying for it in its entirety. And when it's, city initiated, they're the ones using the dashboard. They're the ones using the data. So that's who gets logins to the dashboard, and that's who uses the reporting and generates education and everything else. So when you look at RFPs from 10 years ago, haulers started to be required to include GPS tracking on all their trucks. And when we look at RFPs of the next 10 years, we see this education, AI education, just being kind of the next step or the evolution of that, and that cities want this data. They want clean recycling on organic streams, and it's just going to be part of the services that haulers are providing, and it's part of how we're working with haulers today.
Thank you. And I'll stop and see if anybody else has questions. Well, thank you so much. Do you have a slide with your contact information that we could flash up on the screen if people want to know more?
Definitely. And I don't, but I will leave my contact information in the chat for folks to grab. And feel free to reach out. Love chatting about recycling contamination. Love chatting about behavior change. Anybody wants to jam on those issues, let me know. Have a great day. And thank you so much for having us. This has been a ton of fun.
Thank you so much, Sam. This is fascinating what we're able to do with technology. And Allie, we could stop the recording. We will probably end a little bit early. We'll talk briefly about Recycle Colorado updates, or if anybody wanted to share a challenge, like at the beginning, Rebecca said that she's got styrofoam that doesn't have a home. And I know Ryan
Justin already okayed, so we're running it up there in the next few days here.
Oh, fantastic. Are there any other issues? Yeah, Brian.
Oh, I'm going to stop the recording. Sorry.
Oh,
to
yes, please.
interrupts anyone.